Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our regular Tuesday Facebook Live caregiving session. I'm Kim Bailey with Alzheimer's Orange County. I'm a program and education specialist, and I'm delighted to be with you. Today's session is all about meaningful activities at home. We hope to give you some ideas for staying engaged and content. And before we do that, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Right at Home, in-home care and assistance. And Right at Home is a leader in the in-home care industry. They're trained caregivers provide quality in-home care for seniors and disabled adults who need some assistance to maintain their independence. They do custom care plans and caregiver matching that takes into consideration the services that you need, your loved one's interests, and the personalities of both your loved one and the caregiver that they select for you. If you'd like more information about them, you can visit rightathome.net. So thank you very much, Right at Home, for today's session and all the other sessions that you provide for us. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm flying solo today. Generally, Melissa is hosting. She's in the background today, but also providing some assistance for a family. And so she'll be back with us next time. And before we actually start getting into actual ideas for activities, I want us to spend a few minutes just sort of reframing the way that we look at the whole idea of activities and perhaps shifting our perspective a little bit. And I'm going to quote from one of our favorite experts on dementia care, Dr. Al Power, who wrote the outstanding book, Dementia Beyond Disease. And Dr. Power says that our societal view that people with cognitive changes cannot learn and grow, cannot care for others or give meaningful input, and do not have a useful role in society blinds us to meaningful ways in which to engage them. And so let's just sit back for a minute and think about his words. And so the way in which society views people living with dementia actually works against us when we try to think about meaningful ways to engage them. And so I think what we need to do is really think about things more from their perspective as we try to plan things to fill their days and to fill their hearts. And so that's what we'll attempt to do today. And sometimes I think that we really try to overthink it because in many regards, what people are just looking for are moments of joy. And I know all of you are great fans, as Melissa and I are, of our resident expert, Dr. Galindo. She talks about looking for more moments of joy in day-to-day living for people living with Alzheimer's and other dementias. And so Dr. Powers once asked Ida, who was a 100-year-old nursing home resident, who was somewhat known for her unpleasant disposition. He asked her, Ida, name anything you'd like to do, anything at all, for a day. And look at her response. Ida replied that she would like to watch the sunset and drink a cup of her favorite tea. So note that she didn't say she wanted to go to Hawaii or travel around the world or do some type of complex or wild idea. She simply wanted to watch the sunrise and drink a cup of her favorite tea. So it's all about the details. When we think about it, the little details are what are most important. And so it wasn't just that she wanted her favorite beverage, but it needed to be the type of beverage that she liked. She wanted it prepared the way that she wanted it, in the right mug and at the time when she wanted to drink it. And here she was living in a very institutional setting, and she was really not asking for much. And when she was given her heart's desire, it transformed her personality and it meant the world to her. So we have to sort of dig deep and look into people's background and their past, and we have to actually ask them, what they want. And I think we spend too much time just making up, uh, we spend a lot of times just trying to second guess what our loved ones want, or in the case of professional caregivers, just second guessing what we should be doing with them and to them, etc., when sometimes we just forget to ask. So let's remember to listen to their voices. And, I think that Dr. Power is really onto something here. And so I was really touched by this story. And I have a wonderful vision of Ida in her advanced years, sitting and serenely looking out the window at a beautiful sunrise and drinking her favorite beverage. And sometimes, folks, that's all it takes to bring a smile and a moment of joy to our loved one's face, is letting them indulge in a simple activity that means the world to them. So, yeah, so we have to ask ourselves, what makes an activity meaningful? It has to reflect the person's likes and interests and their background. It should bring comfort, a sense of purpose, and a feeling of belonging. And it needs to match their abilities. And so, as family caregivers, some of this is not as hard as we think it is, because we know the person we're caring for. It's a little harder if we have professional caregivers on the line with us now, listening in and watching. They have to apply person-centered care, which means they need to gather this information about their residents. But you, as family members, have the knowledge and know what your loved one likes. And then the third bullet is a little bit more difficult, because as the disease progresses, we need to continue to have our loved ones doing the things that they love, but we need to ensure that those activities are failure free. That means we have to do something we've talked about in past sessions, which is right sizing. So that means we have to simplify so that we can ensure that our loved ones can do these things, um, and not become frustrated because they've become too complex. So meaningful activities reflect that person's background. They bring comfort, purpose, a feeling of belonging, and they match their abilities. Let's talk for a moment about quality of life. Studies have shown that care partners often rate the quality of life of people living with dementia lower than those people actually rate themselves. So this is another quote from Dr. Power that sort of rocked my world when I first read it. And so what is this telling us? It's telling us that we need to listen to their voices. They have a need to be needed. Robert Simpson, in his book, Through the Wilderness of Alzheimer's, said, "I still want to be needed in some way. I would like you to talk things over with me. Even if I can't respond well, I still need to hear, I need you, even when I can't believe you do." So this is a very moving statement. So when we're thinking about how to spend the day with our loved one and what kinds of things to do, we need to really let these words sink in. The things that we plan have to lead to a sense of our loved ones feeling needed and included. We can't just make a map for the day without talking it over with our loved ones, even if they're not responding well. We can't just do things to people without consulting them. They have to feel included. So I know these are hard lessons because I was a caregiver myself for 6 years, and it's easier said than done. But having a dialogue with someone and offering choice and saying to someone, what do you think? Should we go for a ride today? How about having an adventure with me? Is so different than saying, come on, let's go. We're going to get in the car. You know, involving that person, drawing that person in so that it's like you and me, we're going on an adventure. We're going to see the sights. Sounds so much more like an inviting process. Or saying to that person, you know, there are people who are in need our help. We're in a pandemic. Let's make some cards today for the people working in the hospitals. That would make them feel so happy. Let's sit down and make some cards for them. Making people who have perhaps been volunteers all their life feel like they're still needed, still being productive. These are, just little ideas of things that are approaches that we can use to make people still feel needed, still feel like they're being included, and part of a partnership, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Rather than you're the person in control, you're the person in power dictating to them what's going to be done. Activities need to have meaning. Dr. Power says many of the expressions displayed by people during activities, such as pacing, calling out, or even striking out, come as a reaction to the fact that the activity is devoid of meaning for them. So it's really incumbent upon us to come up with things that really connect with the person's essence, with who they are as a person, with things that are familiar to them, that have meaning for them. So this is our challenge, right? As caregivers, it's our challenge and our mission. We need to find these types of activities that are meaningful. And then at the same time, we have to be mindful that they're not demeaning. They have to have meaning, but they can't be demeaning. And so this is hard. This is tough stuff, particularly when your loved one's in the earlier stages of the illness. Now, as we move along through the illness, it's a little bit easier, but particularly in the early stages of the illness, we need to have activities that are respectful, that build self-esteem. Well, we need to build self-esteem throughout the entire progression, but we need to make sure activities are not too babyish. So this was a direct quote from someone living with the illness. So, these are all considerations that we need to keep in mind as we start to think about the types of activities that make sense. So keep in mind who your person is, those interests, that person-centered approach, that dignity that we bring to their daily living, all of that as we talk about more ideas, etc. And to also give you guidance, there are booklets that were developed by people living with dementia that can advise us. And here are some things that they've said in these books called By Us, For Us. Ask me what is meaningful to me. Learn to become observant and see how these activities make me feel. Validate my feelings and emotions. Include me in decision making. Assist me in ways to adapt and finding ways to adapt my current activities. So again, this last one is alluding to right-sizing activities and finding ways, for example, say a person loves to read and then reading becomes problematic. So we don't want to just discard that as an activity, but maybe we adapt it. So perhaps then we go to books on tape, or maybe we read out loud to that person. We find ways to keep the things they love in their lives but we adapt them and right size them. And just remember, you don't have to be perfect. It's not really the task itself, it's the connection that you're making when you do these activities with them. And really everything you do is an activity. Even if you're doing personal care with someone, that's an opportunity to really connect at a beautiful level with this person. And trust me, people living with this illness never lose that desire. No matter where they are in the illness, they never lose that desire to connect and to communicate with you. And so we don't have to really always just keep the focus on the task at hand. Maybe the activity is something you're trying and it's not really working out, but you're making a beautiful connection. And so, you end up abandoning the activity, but you're still there with the person and they're connecting with you. I know when I was a caregiver, I would try different things and it wouldn't work out, and I would just end up sitting on the couch with the friend that I cared for, and we'd just be sitting on the couch holding hands and laughing or talking about something that didn't make sense. It didn't matter. We were together, we were a team, and we were connecting. So the connection overrides the task. So let's revisit the concept of contented involvement. For some of you have been, some of you are quote unquote regulars here on Tuesdays, but some of you might be new, are watching this video for the first time. So contented involvement is just a space. It's like a zone. It's a comfort zone. Uh, because we know that when we're caring for loved ones that uh, we're, we can get in trouble when our loved ones are understimulated, in other words, bored, and we can get in trouble when they're overstimulated because then we see agitation. So we're always kind of looking for a balance. And that zone between understimulation and overstimulation is called contented involvement. So, how do we get a person to a place of contented involvement? That is when we find the types of activities, and trust me, they don't have to be elaborate, but the things you see on this slide are examples of ways that we can bring people to a state of contented involvement. Just simple activities that bring pleasure. Looking at photos, having some tea, just like the story of Ida, and looking at a sunset. Maybe sitting outside on a deck or sitting in the garden and watching the birds. It could be holding on to a familiar object that has meaning for them, listening to music through a headset. I mean, the person in the image you see certainly looks like she is in the zone of contented involvement. Taking a walk, going for a ride, holding hands. These are all great examples of contented involvement. And really, I always tell caregivers have like a list of 3 or more kind of go to activities. And when you see your loved one either being understimulated or overstimulated, be ready to redirect, with one of these activities. And generally, that will distract that person and bring them back to a state of contented involvement. Uh, Now, let's just talk about some different ideas for activities. And often you can find them just in your day to day work and chores that we do every day in our household. And a lot of times we, as caregivers, want to just do these things ourselves. But this is where people living with the disease feel left out. And you can join people and you can invite people living with the disease into these activities, especially things like dusting, sweeping, folding laundry. And here's where you do have to let go of being a perfectionist because it's not the product that you're interested in here, it's the process. So giving someone a task of folding towels or folding laundry, dusting, sweeping. We'll talk in just a minute about how, repetition is good. Mealtime, helping in a safe way with meal prep or cooking, setting the table. These are all great. And I've told this story on myself before, but I'll tell it again. When I first began providing live-in care for my friend, I made a big mistake. And it was in my haste to be a good caregiver. I left my friend out of, I kind of kicked her out of the kitchen. I wanted to make everything perfect for her. And in doing that, I left her sitting in a recliner, just kind of idle. And that state of understimulation that I was just talking about, which is dangerous, she felt left out, she felt unproductive, and unwittingly, I took away the only one of the only jobs she ever had in her lifetime, which was being a housewife. And so I quickly realized my error. Brought her back into the kitchen. We had a little dinette in the kitchen area. I sat her down there so that she was safe because she was a little bit unsteady on her feet. And I gave her jobs like mixing and folding ingredients into a big bowl. And I had her sorting silverware, and I found things for her to do to help. And then she was back in her element, and we were a team. And we always washed dishes together. She did a pretty bad job with washing dishes. She often forgot to use soap, and I often ended up washing dishes after she went to bed, but it's okay. Again, it's not the product, the end result, it's the process. So, all of these things are good. Bringing people into the activity with you as a team is great. Personal care, as I mentioned before, uh, is an activity. And you see the picture of our beloved Melissa with her dear mom here. And it looks like they're having a spa day and having all kinds of fun. Look at the joy for both of them. And I used to do the same thing with my Mary. We used to, she didn't want to take a shower. So I used to bribe her. Literally, I'd say, it's time for a shower. And after your shower, I'm going to give you a full body massage. And all she could remember was the last part of that, the massage. And so she would do it. And I really, we'd spend hours on that activity. I would turn it into a full blown nails, do the hair, do makeup, all of that. And then we'd take pictures or shoot a little video, send it to her family. And she loved having me do all that, as it turned out. So wonderful activities. And so, yeah, you can turn personal care into an activity that's quite satisfying for your loved one, if you're lucky. I know the bathing is a touchy subject. We have like a whole Facebook Live around activities of daily living where we address that. Uh, Particularly as your loved ones move into later stages of the illness, we fall back on activities that incorporate all of the senses. And so for sound, we use music, and actually, music is fabulous for all of the stages of the illness. We can use nature recordings. If your loved one grew up in a rural environment, that's great. There's even like farm sounds. There's videos you can show um, on YouTube. You can do some things with musical instruments, reading aloud. Don't worry about comprehension. I have found, and others have found, that they just enjoy hearing the sound of your calm voice, speaking slowly and clearly and in the right tone produces wonderful effects. Let them use their sight, looking at photos. My Mary loved looking at her photos for years until she didn't recognize any of the people in the photos anymore, but She actually thought they were my photos and my family, and she still loved looking at them and would often compliment me on how attractive my family was. So it was still a great activity for her. Animal nature videos, bird watching, sit by an open window or go outside, maybe go for a drive if that still works. Visual museum tours. There's a lot more we can do virtually nowadays, we've learned from being confined by the pandemic. Let's see, smell and taste. Oh, we can do a lot with this. Fresh flowers are a big hit. Diffusers, use of essential oils, as long as there's no allergic reaction to things of this nature. Fragrant lotions for hand massage. Hand massage is great. And in fact, I used to also use lotion just to distract and redirect the person I cared for. She developed a late life habit in the later stage of the disease. She would often pick at her hands and her skin, and so I put lotion in her hands, and she would massage her own hands. Um, and we use fragrant lotions for that. And then baking, if you've got a bread machine, that's really great. I mean, just having that smell going through the home is wonderful. I know a lot of the care communities often have cookies baking or bread baking so that when you walk in, that smell is all around you, and it just really just feels like home, smells like home. Uh, or you can taste different things, have taste tests. Touch or tactile. You can have your loved one feel different fabrics, identify shapes by touch. I'm a big fan of soft bean bags. Massage is good. Pet something furry. If not live animals or pets, stuffed animals, especially in later stage, or even dolls. Dolls work very well for women in later stage dementia. You can do some sculpting or finger painting using non-toxic materials. We're missing art on this slide. Art is great. I'm sure I have it in a later slide. And then good for any stage of the illness are activities with repetition. Something that we've learned years ago about activities and about people living with dementia is that while they do have difficulty initiating activities, it's like they've lost their starter button. If you can get them started in an activity, using some prompts or some cues, or even just hand over hand motoring them, they can persevere. They have perseverance on their side. And so they can repeat those activities. So for men, raking leaves is good if they can rake them, and then when they're not looking, you can scatter the leaves and they can rake them some more if they're not too tired. Sweeping is good. Anything repetitious, stringing beads, folding towels, blowing bubbles, clipping coupons, uh, washing and drying silverware or polishing if it's something that's safe, brushing or combing each other's hair. That sounds nice. So all of those tasks or activities that involve repetition are good, and they're part of the normal flow, again, of a household and feel natural to people, especially women doing some of these tasks. Then if you can think of things that are safe for men to do, perhaps workshop type things or sorting nuts and bolts, taking things apart, putting them back together, not to be sexist, but especially from a generational perspective with older adults, sometimes you can find those types of tasks that are a little bit more clearly delineated, male, female things. don't know. You know your loved ones best. So, but things with repetition are good. And then this is a great idea for individuals is to put together what we call a memory box, or it can be a memory basket. And this just means like things at hand, ready to go. These are ready to go activities. And it is very personalized. So we use a person-centered approach. Excuse me, it could be an iPod loaded up with their favorite music from the past, photographs. I have those little booklets, the small vinyl booklets where you slip in the photos. Could be letters from the past, old greeting cards. I've mentioned in past sessions that I found my friend's wedding announcement and laminated it. And she loved looking at that over and over again, as she did, of course, her wedding photos. Items, images, items that sort of relate back to your loved one's previous career, perhaps. Maybe your loved one is a veteran and they have medals from their service, some kind of mementos, souvenirs, maps if they traveled. I had a little spiral bound notebook that was a travel diary from when my Mary traveled with her husband in a travel trailer all over the country that she liked to look through for a long time. Could have playing cards, or maybe there's an adult coloring book and colored pencils in there, jigs, puzzles, activities that they're able to do failure free. Maybe there's a book in there or a journal, something, if they're a person of faith, it could be a Bible or another book that is their chosen book of their faith, poetry. It's just it's up to you, but things that are near and dear to your loved one that are all in one place. And I'll tell you why this works great for family caregivers is that there are times in the day we know when you need a little break and you need to get things done. And if this box can keep them occupied for a while and give you a little chance to get some things done or have a moment to yourself, then this is good. Or when people come to visit, it gives them something to do with your loved one. So this can be a very good thing to have handy. It's your go-to. Also for when you need to get them back to a state of contented involvement. There are things in the memory box that can help you to do that. This goes back to what we were saying earlier about that need to be productive. You can write a card or say thank you. Just something to stay in touch with family and friends, or a project to thank an essential worker. And I think these are actual photographs I think that Melissa used with her family and her mother to who she cared for when the pandemic first started, to say thank you to delivery people and mailmen and mail women, is that a word? Mail persons coming to the door to thank them for their essential work during the pandemic. So these things are so important. I know in my work with groups at Alzheimer's Orange County, I work with people living with the disease in a program called the Clubhouse, or we did before the pandemic. And we would do service projects to help those less fortunate than us. And we would sometimes make sandwiches for homeless people, for example. And sometimes we'd make cards for veterans. I think I mentioned that earlier. And so again, all of these are efforts to have people living with dementia feel like they're still being productive. And trust me, when I had the clubhouse write letters and make cards for service people, we had a number of veterans in our ranks that were it was very touching to see them make these cards and then sign them with their military titles. So, very moving. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we've all learned of new ways to connect virtually since the pandemic. And here are just a couple of examples of sites that you can go on and find a wealth of activities. Covia's Well Connected, seniorplanet.org, and seniorresourcerecreation.com. And I'll also mention our own website, alsoc.org, because there's a button you can push on there for virtual activities, and we have everything from exercise to websites. You can go look at webcams all over the world and participate in a lot of activities that our own interns have designed especially for you. So think about connecting virtually as well. And if you're not savvy about that, we can help. So if you need help with Zoom or other technologies, you can call our helpline and we'll walk you through it. We have some videos you can watch, or we'll just get on the phone with you. I won't. But Melissa or one of our other staff will be happy to assist you with that. So, and keep in mind that, it's really all about the approach. In the beginning, when we first started this morning, I talked a little bit about the philosophy, and I think I just wanted us to all sort of step back and try to see it through their eyes. So we were really kind of talking about shifting our perspective and listening to their voices, how they perceive this whole concept of activities. Um, you know, but let's also be mindful about our approach. The way you invite them to the party matters, okay? So in other sessions, I think I've mentioned David Troxell's best friends approach. And David Troxell is a dementia care expert who says, that above all, what a person with dementia really needs isn't a caregiver, it's a best friend. And so, again, if we can, it's hard because caregiving is the toughest job on the planet. It's so hard and you get so tired. But if you can invite your loved one to an activity with enthusiasm and some fun in your voice, asking them to join you, the way you do that makes a difference in how it all plays out. And you can thank them and show appreciation. Even if it doesn't work out, you can thank them for trying, but show appreciation for their involvement and their willingness to do this. It's like, hey, thanks for doing this with me. This is really fun. Or thank you for trying that. Um, so, it's really about the approach as well. And keep in mind that, and this is a direct quote, rather than being people simply in need of our care, people who forget can teach us about life and living and offer us an opportunity to go deeper into our souls. So, with that is pretty much all of the content that I have to share with you today. But I want to invite you, if you haven't done so already, to sign up for our Caregiver Conference on Thursday. That's this Thursday, February 25th, from 10 to 11:30. It's going to be fantastic. And we've got Dr. Trin is speaking. We've got Dr. Galindo, who you've heard on these Facebook Live sessions before. We have someone coming from, I'm sorry, I don't remember what the person's name is, but to share some humor and laughter with us, which is a great thing. And then everyone who attends and can receive a free resource binder and giveaway bag from our generous sponsors. So be sure to sign up for that. Um, what else do I want to tell you? We don't have a slide for it, but I want to mention before I share our resources with you that I want to talk for a moment about one of our longtime community partners. We've been partnering with them for years and years. They're called the Family Caregiver Resource Center, and they provide services and support for family caregivers. And those services include caregiver assessment and planning, counseling, education, training, support groups, respite planning, and their services are also available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So if you'd like to learn more about the Family Caregiver Resource Center, please visit them at www.caregiveroc.org. Also, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Right at Home, again, leaders in the in-home care industry and great friends of Alzheimer's Orange County. We thank you for sponsoring this session, and if you'd like to learn more about their services, we encourage you to visit them at rightathome.net. And as always, we encourage you to call our helpline during the week. We are at 844-373-4400. Be sure and like us on Facebook. I'm sure you've already done that. That's because you're here, as evidenced by the fact that you're here. But if you haven't already done so, please join our Facebook group for family caregivers. Just write Alzheimer's Orange County Caregiver Support Group in the search bar. And do visit us on our website, as I mentioned, not only for activities, but all the other great resources that we offer, support, education, training, etc., at alsoc.org. Okay. And with that, I will say goodbye. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you at the Caregiver Conference on Thursday. Thank you.